All right, so we are continuing on with Speaker Month. So far this month, I've reviewed the Triangle Borea BR04s. I reviewed the Diptyque 115s. I reviewed the Audio Icon 12s. So today I have an exclusive for you. I am going to talk about the brand new speaker system from Closer Acoustics, simply called Blocks. Now, I'll get into what all of this means, but first, I want to let you guys know I do have a written review that's already live over at my website. If you want to read the written review, which will have a little more details than this video, I'll put a link in the description below. With that said, let's get on to the Closer Acoustics Blocks system. So over a year ago, I reviewed the original Closer Acoustics Augie speaker, the little speaker that was pretty cool, very small, looks like it's smiling. Beautiful with the human voice. I then reviewed that speaker with the Bobs. Closer Acoustics came out with Bass Open Baffle units, and that's what Bob stands for, Bass Open Baffle. And these bass units are not like subwoofers in any way. Instead, they brought a natural, organic type of bass performance. And the cool thing about the Open Baffle bass units is they don't overload your room like a traditional box speaker bass can. There's no boominess, there's no, window rattles. There's just a natural, organic, full, very present bass. It's really, really nice. But since I reviewed that system, I think that video has received over 200,000 views. It was very successful. So there were a few cons with the original Augie and Bob system. First of all, there was no way to connect the Bobs together. They just kind of stacked on each other. So if you have little children in your house running around, it's possible they could have ran into it and knocked it over. The ones I had, there was nowhere really for the Augie to sit and really be stabilized. There was a little pad. Now, since there was also no feet or bass on them. So since then, Jacek over at Closer Acoustics has refined the Bobs and have come out with the Bob Mark II. Also, he has released what I am in love with right here, the OKHO, which is the brand new voice option. You now have two flavors to choose from with the new Bobs. The Augie, which will present a more lit up, detailed, exciting kind of sound, and the OKHO, which is a more relaxed, beautiful, a little bit of warmth, tons of spatial detail in there, just a much more organic, larger kind of sound. So today I'm going to talk about the brand new Bob Mark IIs, what has been updated and improved, as well as the brand new option for them, the OKHO. I'll also talk about the sound differences more in detail between the Augie and the OKHO. I'll also compare these to my Pure Audio Project Duet 15s, which are speakers that I own. So let's go to the beginning. I recently just returned the Bobs, the original Bobs, to Closer Acoustics. I had them here ever since that review. So anyway, I recently had to send that back to Closer Acoustics because Jacek told me he had something new he was working on and he was ready to send it to me to see my thoughts or hear my thoughts on it. And that was the brand new OKHO. So I sent the 4 Bobs back that I had, and it wasn't long until I received 9 boxes from Poland, which is where Closer Acoustics and where these speakers are made. That's where they come from. I opened up all the boxes, and inside these boxes, there were something called a blank, which I'll talk about in a moment. There were 2 blanks, 2 OKHOs, 4 Bobs, a set of platform stands, and some isoacoustic feet that go to the stands. Now, the stands are brand new. These are black. They're kind of glossy piano black, and you screw in the isoacoustics feet to the bottom. This helps get the speakers off the floor, and it kind of stabilizes the sound, and it really, really does. Now, the blank is basically a blank box, a blank block, I should say. And it looks like it's the same size and dimensions as the Bob and the OKHO, but the blank is made to lift those bass units off the floor if you want, or just split up the Bobs. There's different configurations of this system. So you can use that blank in many ways. In fact, there's different configurations of this speaker system. It's really a one of a kind in the world. This is the first modular speaker system that you can design and configure for your space. And that is really the key here, because if you have a small room, You can set up with one blank, one bob, and one OKHO or the Augie. If you have a medium-sized room, my room is 13 by 18, what sounded best in this room was two bobs and the OKHO on the platform in the feet. I didn't need a blank. But I tried every single configuration of the OKHO and the bobs in this space, from the 5-foot tall full stack to the small stack with just one bob on each side. So this is a system that even if you have a smaller room, I mean, not tiny, not a closet-sized room, Open Baffle speakers are very easy to place in a room. They need a little space from the back wall, of course, and they need a little bit of space from the side walls. These are not speakers you want to push up against a wall because you're not going to get the preferred sound from them. So give them a little space to breathe. So once I unboxed them, I saw there were little brass-colored pins in there, and these pins are now there to connect each block together so they're secure and stable. That is a much welcome addition. So you have now the stand and the feet, and these blocks now lock in place, right? That's really, really cool. On the bottom of each block, there's a felt lining as well, so nothing gets scuffed up or scratched, and there's pre-drilled holes into each block. So that worked out really well. When you fasten them together with these little pins, everything now feels solid, and if someone accidentally bumps into them, they're not going to tumble over like building blocks, right? So let's get on to what's new with the Bob Mark II. So the Bob Mark II looks the same. It uses the same EMS driver from France. It's a high quality driver here, specifically made for Open Baffle use. The difference is that inductance coil box that was external is now built into each bob. So you don't have this external box sitting on the side. And again, they now have the holes in it so you can stack them together. Other than that, it's the same driver and it's going to produce the same sound. So what is brand new here is the OKHO. Now this is the star of the show in my opinion. This is a beautiful box. It's the same size as the bobs, and it has that wooden cone in the front. It looks really, really cool. And when I looked at them, I said, these look organic, so I'm gonna guess it's gonna sound pretty organic. Also new is there's a wooden top plate, so you can cover the top of the stack and it gives it a finished look. There's also what I call block socks on the back, where you can tie these socks or wrap them around with Velcro to each block, and it'll give a nicer appearance from behind. Some people didn't want to see the drivers and the cables in the back, so these socks kind of cover up the back. So it gives it a nice finished presentation. The original Augie and Bobs kind of looked a little DIY, a little do-it-yourself, where these now look more refined. They look like a more put-together speaker system. So when you put this all together and you put the wooden top on, everything looks really, really nice. Now these are easy to drive. And let's go back a little bit to the original Augie and Bob. When I did that video, I kind of made a clickbaity thumbnail. I was holding the coil box because I knew nobody would know what that is and it would drive curiosity. And I called it the speaker system of the gods, which some people somehow took offense with. But in reality, I look back, it wasn't clickbaity because I still stand by that. And the reason I say the speaker system of the gods is there's many reasons. First of all, they're easy to drive. You can drive these with a 10 watt per channel tube amp. You could drive these with a 500 watt per channel Class D amp. I tried powering these with a 500 watt per channel Class D amp, with a 100 watt per channel Class A B amp, and a 10 watt per channel tube amp. And also the Wiim Amp Pro, the under $400 streamer DAC and amp that puts out 60 watts per channel. So they are easy to drive. You can drive these with any amplifier really, and they're going to sound really, really beautiful no matter what you power them with, unless it's one of those little like $29 Amazon amps from China. Those things are so cheap as dirt, I would never recommend those. I've bought a slew of them from Amazon. I can't even bring myself to do a video on any of them. But let's move forward. They're easy to drive. They are configurable to any space, any room. My room's 13 by 18. If you have a little bit smaller room, these will work. Use one bob if you have to. If you have a large room, you can go with the full stack and really fill that room with really grand, beautiful music. So they'll work for just about anyone. So another reason is because these just have a complete, whole, rich, organic, ethereal, human soul-stirring sound. These are, you've heard me say, ooh, this speaker sounds organic. If you look up organic, if there was a HiFi dictionary and you looked up organic, I think there'd be a picture of the OKHO and Bobs, right? So these are speakers for anyone that wants to experience a big, grand, beautiful, organic, open baffle presentation. So these have kind of an artistic beauty to them. They may look weird or different to some people because they're blocks and you're stacking them how you want to stack them. But they have kind of a hand-built, handmade kind of look to them. And I love that. You look at the back of the OKHO and carved in the wood, it says OKHO. It's really, really nice. You look at the back of the Bobs and you see the back is shiny and glossy and says Closer Acoustics. Everything is well done here in the way they are built. So I love that about these speakers. I let them run in because J-Stick told me that the bass drivers, he says they require about 100 hours of use to get them loosened up because they can be quite stiff. And when I put them in at first, it seemed like they were a little bass shy, a little stiff, which is what he said. After a few days of playing nonstop, I came in here and the bass was just blooming, right? It was just blooming into the room. And you can just feel the presence of it everywhere. That's one thing these really excel at, is filling the room with sound. And they're really good off axis or right in that sweet spot. I could be in another room of the house and I hear the fullness and the large size that these produce, that organic sound. I could be in the sweet spot and get all of that imaging, the sound stage, all of that good stuff that we look for. Now let's talk about the sound with the OKHO. Now the Augie was a little bit, I said, tipped up, a little more energetic in the treble, right? But with the Bobs, it really fleshed everything out and you still had that detail. The OKHOs are a completely different vibe. With the OKHOs, you're getting a bit of warmth. You're getting a little more relaxed type of sound, but that relaxed sound is coming out really in a 3D manner. These can be very 3D depending on the music you choose. Good recordings will sound 3D. Voices will be locked dead center. And the voice of the OKHO, where the human voice lives, because the OKHO produces the mid-range as well as the treble. It's a beautiful, beautiful presentation because the treble, as I said, is a little relaxed, but somehow those details are still coming out and it's doing the airy thing. But yet the voice is really large. I was listening to a Beck song, The Golden Age, and when his voice comes out, he sounds like he's 10 foot tall, a foot or two in front of the speakers, and it sounds like he's right there as a giant Beck singing to me. And the instruments, they're coming out from left and right, but they're floating a little bit in front of the speaker. Another thing these do with this system is they present the reverb trails, and these things hang in the air. It's one of those kind of speakers, but at the same time, it's very rich, textured, and organic. Very, very nice sound. Now, compared to my other Open Baffle speakers, say the Duet 15s from Pure Audio Project, the OKHO Bob setup that I have here behind me with two Bob Mark IIs and the OKHO, the platform and the feet, I think come in at around $9,000. The Pure Audio projects that I own, I think they come in around $775. Now, without question, the block system here, the OKHO and Bobs, sound quite a bit bigger than those duets, right? In the voice, in that area where the voice lives, the mid-range. It comes out and it just fills the room in a large way. The Pure Audio projects have a bit of this too, but they sound a little bit smaller. But overall, there's a similar vibe going on. I would say the OKHOs are more natural and organic, where the Pure Audio projects are a little more tipped up in the treble and maybe not as fleshed out in the mids. But they both offer that open baffle sound, which I'm really, really becoming addicted to because of how natural and organic it sounds. The bass is so good with these when you're using a pair of Bobs on each side. when there's a bass line or something in the music, you can hear it so clearly. Now, in my written review, I talk in more detail about this with specific song examples. So be sure to check that out if you're interested. But these speakers do something I've never heard other speakers do with the bass. It's like it's there and you can hear it, and it's so clean and it's more pronounced, right? It's more noticeable. Same thing with some background singers with some songs. Background singers would come out and they'd be more 3D. Like, they would startle me because they'd pop out, but yet there was warmth and a natural vibe going on. Really, really spectacular what these do. And I will say that these, I will still say they are the speaker system of the gods, because again, this OKHO is highly sensitive. The bobs are highly sensitive. I'm going to tell you what J6 said about how he got these to work so well together. So I have my laptop here with my written review queued up, where I have the information of how J6 was able to blend these together. And he says the difference between Augie and OKHO is quite dramatic. The 12-inch driver, 97.5 dB efficient with 34 Hz resonant frequency with a whizzer cone installed in a U-shaped open baffle, versus a 4-inch driver that is 91 dB efficient with a 50 Hz resonant frequency in a transmission line design. They're two different designs. The big wideband driver is naturally matched to the bass below 200 Hz, where Augie blends so good in the same area because of its enclosure. The sound differences, he says, Augie is super fast, detailed, and analytical, which I agree with. Holographic 3D soundstage, I agree with. The OKHO is much more relaxed with a lot more body and flesh in the mid-range and lower mid-range with a great soundstage as well. He is spot on here because that OKHO is more relaxed. It has more flesh in the mid-range and lower mid-range. And the Augie in the lower mid-range, you can tell that's where it gets a little bit leaner and more analytical. So he says, how is it possible to use them both with the same bobs in a system with one amplifier given the difference in efficiency? I had to attenuate the 12-inch driver. To achieve this, I chose the best speaker resistors available, luckily made in Poland by Path Audio. So now I want to talk about the amplifiers that I used with these speakers. I started out simple with a Wiim Pro amp, which is really spectacular for $379. No, it's not going to give you the refinement, the uber low noise floor, and all that good stuff that we get with a better quality amplifier. But for the money, it's quite incredible. I used the streamer DAC, everything built in, and I had it hooked up to these, and it sounded really good. I didn't have the most three-dimensional imaging. The sound stage seemed kind of restricted to in between the speakers, but the music was full body, fleshed out, and sounded fantastic. I then moved to a Black Ice Audio FX10 H, which is a little tube amp. It puts out something like 10 watts per channel. It's like $800, and it sounds beautiful. It runs hot though, so beware of that. When I hooked that up, I heard a little more detailed of a sound. The sound stage grew bigger, and the imaging was starting to come into play. With this amp, it wasn't as fleshed out as the Wiim Pro, but it was cleaner in that mid area. It sounded really, I was like, whoa, now we're getting into that high-end sound. I then hooked up my Nagra HD preamp and my Nagra HD DAC X. And instead of the Nagra Classic amp, I placed in those Orchard Audio Class D GAN monoblocks. These are their premium monoblocks. I think they're $5,000 a pair. They put out about 500 watts per channel into 4 ohms, but they are GAN-based Class D. And I was blown away at the performance of these amps with these speakers. I remember the original Augie and Bob, J6 said he liked a high-power Class D amp with them, and I can see why. The sound was in no way lean, strident like that old Class D sound that was awful. Today's Class D, GAN Class D, is really a refined sound that has warmth and beauty to it. And these Orchard Audio amps have just that. They're a little bit of warmth, but there's detail. There's a three-dimensionality. A year or two ago, I reviewed the AGD duets. They were $10,000 a pair. These sound just as good as those. They're a shade warmer where the AGDs were more tipped up. I finally hooked up my classic amp from Nagra in. Now this is a $22,000 amp these days. It runs Class A, I think, for the first 10 watts, and then it goes into Class AB. I plugged that amp in, and of course, it's more refined. It's a little more three-dimensional than even the Orchard amps, and then it's a little bit more present in the upper mid-range and the treble. So things were a little more airy and spatial with the Nagra amp, but there were things I liked about the Orchard amps that I liked a little better than the Nagra amp. And there were some things with the Nagra amp that I liked a little better than the Orchard. But to be honest, I could live with either of these amplifiers in this system. So what else can I tell you about these? There's some cons to them. Now the con for me, it might not be a con for you, it shouldn't be a con for anybody else, is once you set these up and they're all pinned in place and you have the isoacoustics feet and platform, they're almost impossible to move. So my suggestion is if you buy these and you set them up without pinning them in place first and make sure they're in the right position. And once you get the position locked in, then pin them together, because to move them, you're going to have to unstack the blocks and put them back in another spot. So if you want to move them 3 inches, you really should take them all apart. But once you get them in the preferred space and you pin them up, it's going to be well worth it, because once you lock these in, you're going to know instantly, because when you sit in your sweet spot, you're going to hear all that three-dimensionality coming out. You're going to hear that organic nature. And heck, even if you're in another room, you're going to hear that nice full-bodied presentation. So another cool thing about Closer Acoustics is when the original Augie and Bob came out, you had to order them from Poland, right? Now there are USA dealers, and I was working with one of the dealers here, sunmountainav.com. I will link to them in the description as well. They are now a Closer Acoustics dealer, and they will take orders for the Blocks system. Now, some people will say, well, what if you do one Bob and the OKHO? You're still going to need a blank to lift that Bob off the floor, because it would be really, really short. So if you want to go with one Bob, I would suggest a blank, a Bob, and the OKHO. Now, that's if you're in a small room. In my room, I preferred 2 Bobs in this space. 2 Bobs really fleshed everything out and brought forth a lot more of the mid-bass, mid-range information. With 1 Bob in this room, the mid-range was a little leaner. When I tried the full stack, the 5-foot-tall stack of everything, the sound grew even larger. That Beck voice went from 8 feet tall to 10 feet tall. And it was just a little bit too much in my room. Not bass, but just too tall, too imposing. I think that's about it. If you want more information, the links are in the description below to my website review, to the USA dealer, Sun Mountain AV, as well as to Closer Acoustics website. I'll link to a blog post that Jasek made about these, which explains the whole system. I've been in this hobby for 40 of my 55 years, and I just love it. I listen to music every day. I thank you all for coming here. If you like it, leave a comment below, press the thumbs up, subscribe, make sure the notifications are on, and I'll see you in the next one. I love you all, and I'll see you next time. Bye.